Millionaire's daughter humiliates elderly woman on the street. Little did she know what would happen. Madison Harrison had always gotten everything she wanted in life, but she never learned the value of compassion. At 17, the daughter of one of the most respected businessmen in the coastal town of Savannah where she lived, she had developed an arrogance that annoyed even her closest friends. On that sunny Tuesday, she was walking through the city square with her best friend, Brooklyn, when she spotted an elderly woman hunched over, carrying a large bundle of firewood on her back. The woman, approximately 70 years old, wore simple, worn-out clothes and walked slowly due to the weight she carried. Madison immediately stopped, took out her phone and started recording, laughing loudly while shouting humiliating words. "Look at this dirty person cluttering up our city," shouted Madison, keeping her phone pointed at the elderly woman. "You should disappear from the streets, how disgusting." The elderly woman, startled by the shouting, stumbled and dropped all the sticks on the dusty ground of the square. A few people stopped to watch the scene, but no one had the courage to intervene. Brooklyn pulled her friend's arm, trying to make her stop. "Madison, let's go, leave the lady alone," whispered Brooklyn, clearly embarrassed. But Madison only laughed louder, encouraging the onlookers who had stopped to watch. "Guys, record this too. I'm going to post this on my social media. Everyone needs to see how gross this city is because of people like this," Madison continued, moving even closer to the elderly woman. The woman, with tears in her eyes, began silently gathering the sticks while Madison kept recording. The public humiliation intensified when the young woman threw a few dollars on the ground. "Pick it up like an animal," she shouted, laughing cruelly. The elderly woman looked up for the first time, staring at Madison's face for a few seconds. There was something in that gaze that unsettled the young woman for a moment, but she quickly brushed away any feeling of guilt. "What? Why are you looking at me?" Madison taunted. The elderly woman lowered her head again and continued gathering her sticks in silence. Brooklyn finally managed to drag her friend away, but the video was already being edited and posted on Madison's social media. Within hours, the content began to go viral, but not in the way the young woman had expected. The comments were devastating. Thousands of people harshly criticized her attitude, calling her a heartless monster, and calling for a boycott of the Harrison family businesses. The negative backlash grew by the hour, and local journalists had already discovered her identity. William Harrison, her father, was in an important meeting when he received the first call about the video. Initially, he thought it was some misunderstanding, but when he watched the content on his own daughter's social media, he felt his stomach turn. The image he had built as a philanthropic businessman and family man was crumbling in a matter of hours. "Mr. Harrison, we need to do damage control immediately," said Victoria, his public relations advisor. "The press is calling non-stop." William dismissed everyone from the room and stayed alone, watching the video over and over. He couldn't believe he had raised a daughter capable of such cruelty. The 52-year-old businessman had built his fortune through hard work, coming from a simple family, but he had apparently failed miserably in educating his only daughter. That same night, an unexpected call would change everything. On the other end of the line, a concerned female voice identified herself as a nurse from St. Jude's Medical Center, the largest hospital in the city. "Mr. Harrison?" "My name is Sarah. I'm a nurse here at the hospital. Could you come here? We have a patient who fainted on the street today and is asking to speak with you." "With me?" "There must be some mistake," replied William, confused. "No, sir. She repeated her name several times. Mrs. Martha Miller. She said it's very important." William didn't recognize the name immediately, but something deep inside made him agree to go to the hospital. Upon arriving, he found a woman of about 70, thin and frail, connected to some medical equipment. It was only when she opened her eyes and looked directly at him that a distant memory began to form in his mind. "Will," murmured the elderly woman in a weak voice. The nickname struck William like a bolt of lightning. Only one person in his entire life had ever called him that with such affection. His legs almost gave way as the memories began to come back with full force. "Mrs. Martha," he whispered, moving closer to the bed. Did you work in our house when I was a child?" The elderly woman smiled weakly, her eyes glistening with tears of emotion and sadness mixed together. "You've grown so much, my boy. You became a successful man, just as I always knew you would." William's memories returned like an avalanche. Mrs. Martha had been much more than a housekeeper in his home. She had been his second mother during his teenage years, when his parents traveled constantly for business. She was the one who made his favorite meals, helped him with his schoolwork, and comforted him during his typical teenage crises. "Mrs. Martha, How are you here? What happened to you all these years?" asked William, overcome by an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. "Life wasn't easy after I left your family's home, Will, but I always followed you from afar. I saw when you got married, when your daughter was born." Her voice grew weaker. "I also saw the video she posted today." William's embarrassment was absolute. The woman who had been like a mother to him during his formative years had been publicly humiliated by his own daughter. "Mrs. Martha, I didn't know it was you. If I had known, I know, my son. You were always a good boy. But I worry about your daughter. She needs to learn some important lessons about life." That night, William couldn't sleep. He stayed awake, remembering every moment he spent with Mrs. Martha during his youth. She had been dismissed abruptly when he was 17, and he had never questioned the reasons. His parents simply said she had been let go and hired someone else. The next day, William decided to investigate the real reasons for Mrs. Martha's dismissal. He combed through old family company files and found documents that left him shocked. She had been falsely accused of theft by Mildred, the housekeeper who replaced her, who was apparently jealous of the closeness between Martha and the family. The documents showed that Mildred had planted false evidence and convinced William's parents that Martha was stealing family jewelry. The discovery was devastating. An honest and caring woman had been unfairly dismissed and slandered, losing not only her job but also her reputation, which prevented her from finding work in other family homes. "How could I have been so blind?" murmured William alone in his office. He also discovered that Martha had tried to contact him a few times over the years, but the letters were intercepted by his parents, who didn't want trouble from the past. William found some of these letters stored in an old folder, and every line he read was like a stab to his heart. In one of the letters, dated 5 years after the dismissal, Martha wrote about how proud she was to see William graduate from university and how she wished for his happiness. In another, written when Madison was born, she expressed her wishes that the girl would grow up with a kind and generous heart. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Meanwhile, Madison was at home, watching her reputation being torn apart on social media. The humiliation video had reached over 2 million views in less than 48 hours, and the comments were unanimously negative. Major influencers were sharing the content with devastating criticism, and even her closest friends began to distance themselves. "Val, you need to take that video down," said Brooklyn during a call. "My mom forbade me from hanging out with you after seeing that." "Everyone is overreacting," replied Madison, but her voice showed insecurity for the first time. "It was just a joke." "A joke? Madison, you humiliated an elderly woman in front of everyone. How is that a joke?" For the first time in her life, Madison was facing real consequences for her actions. Not just on social media, but also at school, where classmates and teachers looked at her with disapproval. Even family employees had quit, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. William, still troubled by the discovery about Mrs. Martha Miller, decided it was time to take drastic action. He called an urgent family meeting, including his wife Catherine and Madison. The tension in the air was palpable when he began to speak. "Madison, I need to tell you something about the elderly woman you humiliated yesterday," began William, his voice heavy with emotion. "Dad, don't start with the drama. Everyone is overreacting because of a silly video," interrupted Madison with disdain. "This woman isn't just anyone, Madison. She was like a second mother to me when I was your age. She took care of me when your grandparents weren't around, and she was unjustly fired from our home over 30 years ago." Madison's face changed slightly, but she still tried to maintain her defensive posture. "So what? That doesn't change anything. She's still a beggar on the street." His daughter's response made William explode for the first time in his life. He had never yelled at Madison, always trying to be an understanding father. but her coldness in the face of the situation was the last straw. She is not a beggar. Mrs. Martha Miller is a dignified woman who worked her whole life honestly, and you humiliated her publicly without knowing anything about her story. Catherine, who had remained silent, finally spoke. William, perhaps you should tell our daughter the whole truth. In the following days, William made several visits to the hospital to monitor Mrs. Martha Miller's recovery. With each conversation, more memories surfaced, and he realized how important that woman had been in shaping him as a person. She had been fired precisely when he needed guidance the most, during the transition from adolescence to adulthood. Mrs. Miller, why did you never try to contact me directly over all these years? Asked William during one of the visits. I did try, my boy. I wrote several letters, but I never got a response. With time, I understood that perhaps it was better to let you live your life, she replied with a heartbreaking sadness. I never received your letters. My parents intercepted them. Mrs. Miller showed no surprise. She had always suspected that William's parents would not approve of any contact between them after her dismissal. I hold no grudge, Will. Your parents were protecting their family. I understand. Mrs. Miller's capacity for forgiveness impressed William. Even after so many years of suffering caused by the injustice, she showed no bitterness. During one of these visits, William had an idea. He discreetly took a photo of Mrs. Martha Miller and showed it to some of the company's longer-serving employees, hoping someone would recognize her. To his surprise, Mr. Arthur, the driver who had worked with the family for 40 years, recognized her immediately. Of course I remember Mrs. Martha. She was a saint. She took care of you as if you were her own son. We were all very sad when she left, said Mr. Arthur. Do you know the details about her departure? Arthur hesitated for a moment, but decided to tell the truth he had kept for decades. Mr. William, we all knew Mrs. Martha was innocent. Mildred was jealous because she was closer to the family. She planted some jewelry in her room and then found it in front of your parents. The confirmation of the injustice done to Mrs. Martha weighed like a tombstone on William's heart. He had lost 30 years of companionship with a person who genuinely loved him, and worse, he had allowed his daughter to grow up without knowing basic human values. That night, William made a radical decision. He would expose the whole truth to Madison, regardless of how she reacted. The young woman needed to understand the gravity of what she had done and learn about the consequences of her actions. The next morning, William woke Madison up early and said they were going on a trip together. She complained, but he was unyielding. Without explaining the destination, he drove to the under-resourced neighborhood of the city where Mrs. Martha's house was. Why are we here? Asked Madison, looking around with disgust. You are going to see the house of the woman you humiliated, replied William, stopping the car in front of a small but well-kept house. The residence was simple, with colorful walls and a small garden in front where some flowers and medicinal plants grew. Despite its simplicity, everything was clean and tidy. William knocked on the door and waited. Mrs. Martha opened the door and smiled upon seeing William, but her smile faded a little when she saw Madison beside him. The young woman, in turn, couldn't believe she was being forced to visit the beggar she had humiliated. Mrs. Martha, this is my daughter Madison. She would like to talk to you, said William, gently pushing his daughter forward. Madison remained silent, clearly embarrassed and irritated. Mrs. Martha invited them in, and the interior of the house surprised the young woman. Despite its simplicity, everything was extremely organized and clean. There were plants everywhere, creating a welcoming and fragrant atmosphere. Would you like some coffee? Offered Mrs. Martha, addressing Madison in particular. The young woman shook her head, refusing any courtesy. She just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. Mrs. Martha served a strong coffee for William and sat in an old but comfortable armchair. Madison, Mrs. Martha would like to tell you about the years she spent taking care of me, said William. I don't want to hear it, Madison replied curtly. Mrs. Martha observed her for a few moments with a look that mixed sadness and compassion. That's all right, dear. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but I would like to tell you a few things about your father when he was your age. Despite her resistance, something in Mrs. Martha's gentle voice made Madison pay attention. Your father was a very rebellious boy. He gave his grandparents, who traveled a lot for business, a hard time. I was responsible for him most of the time." Mrs. Martha began to recount stories of William's adolescence that not even Madison knew. Episodes of rebellion, moments of vulnerability, typical teenage crises. With each story, the image Madison had of her father as an always perfect and controlled man began to change. Once he came home crying because his schoolmates were teasing him about his weight. He was quite chubby back then, shared Mrs. Martha Miller with a nostalgic smile. Madison looked at her father surprised. She had never seen him overweight and never imagined he could have been bullied. "I spent the whole afternoon talking to him about how to deal with others' teasing. I taught him that true strength comes from within, and that people who humiliate others are often trying to hide their own insecurities." Mrs. Miller's words hit Madison like a slap. She was being indirectly confronted about her own behavior, but in a subtle way that made her reflect instead of defend herself. "Your father learned those lessons very quickly. He became a more empathetic boy, more careful with others' feelings. That's why he became the successful man he is today," continued Mrs. Miller. William listened, moved by memories he thought he had forgotten. Mrs. Miller had truly been fundamental in his upbringing, and he felt guilty for having allowed her to be unfairly pushed out of his life. After an hour of stories and memories, William got up to leave. Madison had remained quiet for almost the entire visit, but she was clearly impacted by the revelations. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for having us, and forgive me for everything that happened in the past," said William, hugging the elderly woman affectionately. "No need to apologize, my son. The past is in the past. What matters is what we do in the present," she replied, returning the hug. Before leaving, Mrs. Miller approached Madison. "Young lady, I don't hold a grudge for what you did to me. You are young and still learning about life. But I hope one day you understand that all people deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of their social condition." On the way back home, the silence between father and daughter was deafening. Madison looked out the window, lost in thought she couldn't even organize herself. Mrs. Miller's words echoed in her mind, especially the comment about people who humiliate others to hide their own insecurities. "Why did you never tell me about her before?" Madison finally asked. "Because I myself had forgotten how important she was to me. Sometimes we only realize people's value when we lose them," replied William. That night, Madison stayed up late, scrolling through social media and rereading the negative comments about her video. For the first time, she tried to put herself in the elderly woman's place. How would she feel if she were publicly humiliated by a stranger? The reflection deeply troubled her. In the following days, Madison's routine changed drastically. At school, she became the target of critical looks and whispered comments. Teachers who once treated her with deference due to her family's influence now showed coldness. Classmates who always flattered her began to drift away. "Madison, you need to do something to fix this," said Brooklyn during recess. "Everyone is talking badly about you." "Do what?" "Apologize to a beggar." "She is not a beggar. Your own father said she took care of him when he was young," retorted Brooklyn. Her best friend's observation made Madison realize that even the closest people were questioning her behavior. She was used to being admired and envied. She had never faced social disapproval on such a scale. During lunch that day, William received a concerning call from the hospital. Mrs. Miller had been admitted again with health complications. Without hesitation, he cancelled all his appointments and went to visit her. "How are you feeling?" asked William, holding the elderly woman's frail hand. "A bit tired, but I'm already better," she replied with a weak smile. "Mrs. Martha, I would like to do something to help you. I know I can't make up for all these lost years, but, well, I don't need financial help. I have my pension, my little house. I'm fine," she gently interrupted. "Then what can I do?" Mrs. Martha was thoughtful for a few moments before answering. "Help your daughter find the right path. She has a good heart, but she is lost. If you can teach her to be a better person, that will be the greatest gift you can give me." Mrs. Martha's words touched William deeply. Even after being humiliated by Madison, she genuinely cared about the young woman's well-being. That night, William had a serious conversation with Catherine about the education they had given their daughter. "We failed, Catherine. We gave her everything she wanted materially, But we forgot to teach basic values, admitted William. It's not too late to change that, replied Catherine. But how? She's 17, her personality is already formed. People can change at any age, William. What matters is that she wants to change. The next day, William decided to implement drastic changes in Madison's life. He cut up her credit card, drastically reduced her allowance, and established strict rules about social media use. This is unfair, protested Madison when she learned of the changes. Unfair is what you did to Mrs. Martha, William replied firmly. I already apologized. When? To whom? You didn't even speak to her during the visit. Madison realized she really hadn't formally apologized. In fact, she had spent the entire visit in silence, showing disinterest and impatience to leave. If you want to regain your privileges, you'll have to earn them back, William continued. And that starts with you learning to treat all people with respect. As part of the changes, William decided that Madison would start doing community work on weekends. He signed her up as a volunteer at the New Beginnings Center, a local organization that offered meals and activities for families in need. I'm not doing that, declared Madison. Then you won't leave the house on weekends, William replied calmly. The battle of wills between father and daughter lasted a few weeks. Madison tried every possible strategy, emotional blackmail, tantrums, threats to run away from home, but William remained firm in his decision, supported by Catherine. Finally, on the first Saturday in May, Madison woke up early and got ready to go to the community center. She had decided to do the volunteer work, but only to regain her freedom and privileges. She had no intention of taking the activity seriously. The New Beginnings Center was located in a simple neighborhood of Savannah, in an old building that had been renovated to house the activities. When Madison arrived, she was greeted by Mrs. Eleanor, the coordinator of the place. You must be Madison. Your father called me explaining the situation, said Mrs. Eleanor with a welcoming smile. Madison just nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Today you'll help in the kitchen, preparing the lunch we serve for families in the community, the coordinator explained. The community center's kitchen was well equipped but simple. Madison, who had never done anything beyond heating food in the microwave, felt completely lost. The other volunteers, women of various ages, welcomed her kindly, but she remained closed off and uncommunicative. You can start by washing these potatoes, said Mrs. Hazel, a woman in her 60s who coordinated the kitchen. Madison picked up the potatoes with visible disgust, unable to hide her aversion to manual labor. Her perfectly manicured nails suffered immediately from the activity, which irritated her even more. Throughout the morning, she watched the other volunteers working with joy and dedication. They chatted animatedly while preparing large pots of food, sharing stories from their lives, and showing genuine concern for one another. You're very quiet, dear, commented Mrs. Hazel. Is this your first time here? Yes, and I hope it's my last, murmured Madison. Mrs. Hazel laughed at the response, not taking the young woman's comment personally. I used to think the same way when I started. My husband brought me here after I lost my job. I thought volunteer work was a waste of time. And isn't it? Asked Madison sarcastically. At first I thought so, but then I discovered that helping others made me feel useful in a way no job ever had before. Madison didn't reply, but continued paying attention to the conversation. You know what impresses me most here, continued Mrs. Hazel. The people we serve are more grateful and polite than many rich people I've known in my life. The observation bothered Madison, who felt an indirect criticism of her own behavior. Around noon, families began arriving for lunch. Madison was assigned to help serve the food, a task she performed with visible reluctance. The people passing by her thanked her kindly, some even trying to strike up a conversation, but she responded with monosyllables or simply ignored them. It was when a boy of about 8 years old approached the counter where she was serving. The boy had simple but clean clothes and a bright smile on his face. Hi, miss. Thank you for the food, said the boy enthusiastically. Madison served him in silence, but the boy didn't give up on the interaction. You're new here, right? I'm Ethan. I come here with my grandma every Saturday, he continued, oblivious to the young woman's coldness. Cool, replied Madison curtly. Ethan stayed there for a few moments, clearly wanting to talk more, but Madison completely ignored him. The boy finally walked away, joining an elderly lady who was sitting at one of the tables. Observing the scene, Mrs. Hazel approached Madison. "That boy has been coming here for 2 years with his grandmother. His father abandoned the family, and his mother works 3 jobs to support them. But notice how cheerful and polite he is." Madison looked in the direction of the boy, who was chatting animatedly with his grandmother while they ate. Despite the difficult situation Mrs. Hazel had described, he radiated a genuine happiness that contrasted with the bitterness she felt in her own life full of privilege. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. At the end of that first day of volunteer work, Madison was exhausted and irritated. Her hands were dry, her nails were chipped, and she could smell food ingrained in her clothes. More than that, she felt uncomfortable with the conflicting emotions the day had stirred. On the way back home, she couldn't stop thinking about the boy Ethan and his genuine joy despite the hardships. How could someone in such a precarious situation be happier than she was, who had everything money could buy? "How was the first day?" asked William when she arrived home. "Horrible. I never want to go back there," replied Madison, heading straight upstairs to her room. But something had changed in her, even if she didn't want to admit it. During the following week, images from the community center returned to her mind several times. She found herself thinking about the stories she had heard, the people she had met, and especially about the boy Ethan's smile. At school, her social situation continued to deteriorate. The video of the humiliation had spread so widely that it reached the administration, who called a meeting with her and her parents to discuss disciplinary consequences. "Madison, your behavior reflects poorly on our institution's reputation," said the principal, Principal Margaret, during the meeting. "We need to discuss the measures that will be taken." "What measures?" asked Catherine, worried. "We are considering a temporary suspension and mandatory community service as part of a social re-education program." William intervened in the conversation. "Principal Margaret, my daughter is already doing community service. I believe this experience is already having an impact on her education." The principal agreed to give Madison a chance, but made it clear that any new incident would result in more severe measures. On the second Saturday of volunteer work, Madison arrived at the community center with the same reluctance as the previous week. But this time, the boy Ethan recognized her and came to talk to her as soon as he saw her. "Hi, miss, you came back," he said, with the same enthusiasm as the week before. "Yeah, unfortunately," murmured Madison. Ethan laughed at the response, interpreting it as a joke. "My grandma wants to talk to you. She said you're very pretty and that she's sure you're a good person." The remark caught Madison by surprise. How could anyone think she was a good person after being so cold the previous week? Ethan led her to the table where his grandmother was sitting. The lady, approximately 70 years old, had a gentle face and kind eyes that vaguely reminded her of Mrs. Martha Miller. "Dear, my grandson hasn't stopped talking about you all week," said the grandmother with a caring smile. "I'm Mrs. Evelyn. Nice to meet you." Madison felt embarrassed by the lady's kindness, especially considering how she had treated Ethan the previous week. "Hi," she replied timidly. "Ethan told me you're new here. It's good that you decided to help the community. Young people like you bring new energy to the place." During the conversation with Mrs. Evelyn, Madison learned more details about the family's situation. The lady's husband had recently passed away, leaving her responsible for helping care for her grandson while his mother worked. Despite the financial difficulties, she spoke about life with optimism and gratitude. "You know, dear, I always tell my Ethan that it doesn't matter if we have little money. What matters is having health, family, and a kind heart," Mrs. Evelyn philosophized. The elderly woman's words echoed in Madison's mind for the rest of the day. She began to observe the people around her more attentively, noticing details she had ignored the previous week. The genuine gratitude on the faces of the people receiving the food, the solidarity among the volunteers, the joy of the children playing in the center's small courtyard. During lunch, she decided to sit at the table with Ethan and Mrs. Evelyn, instead of isolating herself as she had the previous week. The boy was visibly happy for the company, and began telling stories about his school and his friends. "Miss, can I ask you a question?" Ethan said suddenly. "You can," replied Madison. "Why do you seem sad?" "My grandma always says that when we help others, we become happier." The boy's innocent question caught Madison off guard. How could she explain to a child that she wasn't there by choice, but as a kind of punishment? "I'm not sad," she lied. "Yes, you are. I know when people are sad. My mom gets sad sometimes when she thinks about my dad." The boy's honesty completely disarmed Madison. For the first time since she had arrived there, she felt the urge to be honest with someone. "It's just, I've never done volunteer work before. I don't know if I'm any good at it," she admitted. "You don't have to be good right from the start," exclaimed Ethan. "My grandma always says we learn by doing, and you're already helping, so you're on the right track." The boy's simple logic made Madison smile for the first time in weeks. Ethan celebrated as if he had achieved a great victory. "See? When you smile, you look so much prettier," he said, making Mrs. Evelyn and even Madison laugh. By the end of that second day of volunteering, Madison felt different. Not necessarily better, but different. The genuine interaction with Ethan and Mrs. Evelyn had stirred feelings she wasn't used to. Empathy, humility, and a strange sense of purpose. During the following week, she caught herself thinking about the stories she had heard at the community center. Ethan had mentioned that his mother was looking for a second job to afford school supplies for him. The information bothered her inexplicably, since she spent more on a single trip to the mall than Ethan probably saw in months. At school, her situation began to stabilize slightly. The mean comments decreased, although she was still the target of critical looks. Brooklyn, her best friend, began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. "Madison, you're different," Brooklyn commented during recess. "Different how?" "I don't know. Quieter. Less arrogant." The observation made Madison reflect. She really was feeling less sure of her opinions and behaviors. The experiences at the community center were planting seeds of doubt about values she once considered absolute. On the third Saturday of volunteering, Madison woke up with a strange feeling. She was almost eager to go. Not exactly excited, but curious about how the day would be. When she arrived at the center, Ethan greeted her with his usual enthusiasm. "Hi, miss. Today my mom is coming for lunch here. She wants to meet you," he said, running to hug her. The boy's spontaneous hug caught Madison by surprise. She wasn't used to such genuine and selfless displays of affection. Her friendships had always been based on mutual interests or social convenience. During the morning, she worked with more willingness than in previous weeks. She still didn't find pleasure in the activity, but there was a growing acceptance that this was part of her new reality. "Mrs." Hazel noticed the change in her posture. "You seem more relaxed today," commented the veteran volunteer. "Really?" replied Madison, genuinely surprised. "The first week, you looked like you wanted to be anywhere but here. Today you seem more present." The observation made Madison realize she really was getting more involved with the activities. She had talked with other volunteers, smiled at the children, and even asked questions about how the work was organized. Around midday, Ethan arrived accompanied by a young woman who was clearly his mother. She was about 30 years old, with a tired appearance, but a kind smile. Her clothes were simple but impeccable, and she carried herself with the dignified posture of someone who works hard to support their family. "Mom, this is the lady I told you about," said Ethan, pulling his mother by the hand to where Madison was. "Hi, dear. I'm Jennifer." "Ethan hasn't stopped talking about you," said the woman, extending her hand to greet Madison. "Nice to meet you. I'm Madison," she replied, shaking the woman's hand. "Ethan told me you're very kind to him. I wanted to thank you." "Not everyone has patience with such a chatty kid," laughed Jennifer. Madison felt embarrassed by the compliment, knowing she hadn't been particularly kind to Ethan in the first few weeks. But the boy immediately defended her. "She is really nice, Mom, and she's getting happier every week." During lunch, Jennifer told her more about her life. She worked as a cleaner in 3 different houses, in addition to doing some sewing gigs on weekends. Ethan's father had left the family when the boy was 5, and since then she had struggled alone to raise her son. "It's not easy, but we manage," said Jennifer with a resigned smile. "Ethan is my motivation to keep going. I want him to have opportunities I never had." Madison listened to the story in silence, involuntarily comparing Jennifer's struggle with her own privileged life. She had never worried about getting money for basic needs, much less working 3 jobs to support a family. "And you, Madison, are you still in school?" asked Jennifer. "I am, in my senior year of high school," replied Madison. "That's great. Studying is very important. I only managed to finish middle school, but I dream of Ethan going to college one day." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Jennifer showing genuine interest in Madison's life. The young woman was touched by the woman's kindness, especially considering the difficulties she faced daily. When Jennifer got up to leave, she hugged Madison affectionately. "It was a pleasure to meet you, dear. I hope you keep coming here. People like you make a difference in our lives." After Jennifer and Ethan left, Madison was thoughtful. The family's sincere gratitude had touched her in a way she didn't expect. For the first time, she began to feel that perhaps her presence there really mattered to someone. That afternoon, she decided to talk to Mrs. Eleanor, the center coordinator, about the organization's activities. "Mrs. Eleanor, how long has this center existed?" asked Madison. "It will be 10 years next month. It started small, just serving a few meals a week, and grew as the community's needs grew," explained the coordinator. "How do you manage to keep everything running?" "With a lot of dedication and very little funding," laughed Mrs. Eleanor. "We depend on donations, volunteer work, and some government programs. It's not always easy, but it's worth it to see the impact we have on people's lives." Madison grew curious about the challenges faced by the organization. Mrs. Eleanor took advantage of the young woman's interest to share more details about how the center operated and its future projects. "Our biggest dream would be to have the resources to offer tutoring for the children. Many families can't afford private tutors, and their kids end up falling behind in school," the coordinator shared. "And why don't you?" "We lack the money to hire teachers and buy educational materials. Everything here operates on a shoestring budget." The information planted a seed in Madison's mind. She had wasted more money on frivolities than the community center probably received in donations in an entire month. At the end of that 3rd day of volunteer work, Madison said goodbye to the other volunteers more warmly than in previous weeks. Some of them had become familiar, and she was beginning to value the conversations she had with them during breaks. On her way back home, she reflected on the changes she was feeling. The initial anger and resentment were giving way to a genuine curiosity about the people she met at the center. She was beginning to see them as individuals with complex and interesting stories, rather than just needy people who required help. That night, Madison did something unprecedented. She sought out William to talk about the volunteer work. "Dad, can I ask you something?" she said, entering the office where he was working. "Of course, honey. What is it?" "Do you think a person can really change? Like truly change, not just pretend?" The question took William by surprise. It was the first time in months that Madison had initiated a serious conversation with him. "Why are you asking that?" Madison hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's just, at the community center, I'm meeting people who, I don't know, are different from what I thought." "Different how?" "More human, you know? Like they have real problems, but they're happy, and they're kind to me even without really knowing me." William felt immense relief hearing his daughter's words. Finally, the experiences at the community center were having the impact he had hoped for. "And you? Do you feel different?" William asked carefully. "I think so. Sometimes I think about things I never thought about before. Like, why does that family have so little, and we have so much? It doesn't seem fair." "Life isn't always fair, Madison. But people who have more also have more responsibility to help those who have less." "Is that why you make so many donations to charities?" "Partly, yes, but also because it makes me feel useful, like my success has a greater purpose." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Madison asking questions that showed deep reflection on social and ethical issues. William felt proud of the transformation he was beginning to see in his daughter. In the 4th week of volunteer work, Madison arrived at the community center with a proposal. She had spent the week thinking about the conversation with Mrs. Eleanor about the need for tutoring classes. "Mrs. Eleanor, I was thinking about those tutoring classes you mentioned," said Madison, looking for the coordinator. "Yes? What about them?" "I could help by giving Portuguese and English lessons. I'm not a teacher, but I get good grades in those subjects." Mrs. Eleanor was visibly surprised and excited by the proposal. "That would be wonderful, Madison. But are you sure? It would mean extra work on top of what you already do here on Saturdays. I'm sure I could come here twice a week after school." Madison's decision to increase her involvement with the community center was not well received by everyone. Her school friends didn't understand why she was wasting time with volunteer work. "Maddie, you're getting weird," said Samantha, one of her friends. "Before, you only thought about shopping, parties and trips. Now you only talk about the community center." "Maybe I'm discovering more important things," replied Madison. "More important than what? You've always had everything. Why do you want to become a saint now?" Her friend's criticism bothered Madison, but it also made her realize how much her priorities had changed. Things she once considered essential, like brand-name clothes and exclusive parties, were losing importance in her life. When she told her parents about her decision to teach at the community center, the reaction was mixed. Catherine expressed concern about the time it would take away from her studies, but William was proud of the initiative. "Are you sure you want to take on this extra responsibility?" asked Catherine. "I am, Mom. I feel like I need to do this." "Why?" Catherine insisted. Madison was thoughtful for a few moments before answering. "Because for the first time in my life I feel like I can do something truly useful. It's not about me. It's about helping other people." The answer demonstrated a maturity her parents hadn't seen in Madison before. They agreed with her decision, but set the condition that she maintain her grades at school. On the first day of class at the community center, Madison felt more nervous than ever. She had prepared teaching materials with the help of her school teachers, but she didn't know if she would be able to convey knowledge effectively. 6 children between 8 and 12 years old had signed up for the classes. Ethan was among them, and his familiar presence reassured Madison. She already knew the other children from the Saturday lunches, which made the initial interaction easier. "Hi, everyone. I'm Madison, and I'll be your Portuguese and English teacher," she said, trying to sound confident. The children responded enthusiastically, excited about the opportunity to have free extra classes. Madison started with simple Portuguese exercises, assessing each one's level of knowledge. During the first class, she discovered that some children had basic literacy difficulties, while others were more advanced. The diversity of levels required creativity to keep everyone engaged. Ethan, as expected, stood out for his curiosity and eagerness to learn. He asked questions constantly and showed genuine enthusiasm for each new concept presented. "Teacher Madison, can you teach me to speak English like they do in the movies?" he asked during a break. "Yes, I can, Ethan, but let's take it slow. First, you need to learn Portuguese well," she replied, smiling. At the end of the first class, Madison felt exhausted but fulfilled. Seeing the children's interest and their gratitude for the opportunity to learn awakened in her a satisfaction she had never experienced before. In the following weeks, the classes became one of the most rewarding parts of Madison's week. She developed creative teaching methods, using games, songs, and stories to keep the children's interest. Ethan continued to be her most dedicated student. He always arrived early and stayed late, making the most of every minute of class. His thirst for knowledge impressed Madison and motivated her to prepare increasingly better lessons. "Teacher, can I ask you a personal question?" Ethan said one day after class. "You may." "Why did you decide to teach us? You're rich. You don't need to work here." Ethan's question made Madison reflect on her motivations. The answer wasn't simple, as she herself was still discovering the reasons for her changes. "You know, Ethan, I found out that teaching you all makes me happy in a way I've never felt before. It's like I'm finally doing something important." "Oh, so you're learning too," said the boy with his childlike wisdom. "Yes, I am, Ethan. You are teaching me much more than I teach you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Madison's transformation did not go unnoticed at school. Teachers began to notice changes in her behavior and attitude. She had become more participative in class, showed more empathy towards struggling classmates, and even her academic performance had improved. "Madison, can I speak with you after class?" said Mr. David, her literature teacher. After class ended, she approached the teacher's desk, curious about what he wanted to talk about. "I've noticed positive changes in you over the past few weeks. Your essays are more mature, with deeper reflections on social issues," the teacher commented. "Thank you," replied Madison, slightly embarrassed by the praise. "May I ask what motivated this change?" Madison hesitated, not knowing how to explain her journey of transformation without sounding preachy or false. "I started doing volunteer work and met people who made me think about life differently." "That's very mature of you. Few young people your age have that social awareness." The conversation with the teacher made Madison realize that her transformation was evident to others. This made her both proud and responsible for maintaining the positive changes. During one of the classes at the community center, an incident tested Madison's patience and commitment. One of the children, Lily, a 10-year-old, was going through difficulties at home and arrived at class visibly upset. "Lily, is everything okay?" asked Madison, noticing the girl was too quiet. "My mom fought with my dad yesterday. He left the house and didn't come back," said Lily with tears in her eyes. The situation was delicate, and Madison felt unprepared to deal with complex family issues. Her first reaction was panic, but she took a deep breath and tried to offer comfort. "Lily, sometimes adults fight, but it's not your fault. Do you want to talk about it, or would you prefer we do an activity to distract you?" The girl chose to continue with the class, but was clearly distracted. Madison adapted the lesson to include more playful and less demanding activities, trying to create a welcoming environment for Lily. After class, she sought out Mrs. Eleanor to report the situation. "You did the right thing," reassured the coordinator. "Sometimes offering a stable and caring environment is what these children need most. But what if she needs professional help? I don't know how to identify signs of serious problems." "We'll talk to her mother, and if necessary, refer her for psychological support. You don't have to solve all the problems by yourself, Madison." The incident with Lily made Madison realize the complexity of the lives of the children she taught. Many of them faced difficulties that went far beyond formal education, and she began to understand that her role there was greater than just transmitting academic knowledge. Motivated by this understanding, Madison decided to delve deeper into the work of the community center. She began participating in planning meetings and contributing ideas to improve the programs offered. "Mrs. Eleanor, I was thinking, what if we organized a summer charity fair to raise funds for the center?" suggested Madison during a meeting. "That's a great idea, but it would be a lot of work to organize." "I can coordinate. I have experience organizing events," said Madison, referring to the private parties she used to organize at home. "Are you sure? It would be a big responsibility." "I'm sure. I want to do something special for the center." The decision to organize a summer charity fair marked a new level of Madison's commitment to community work. She spent the next few weeks planning every detail of the event, from the decorations to the food and activities. To her surprise, some of her friends from school offered to help when they heard about the project. Brooklyn was the first to volunteer. "Maddie, can I help with anything?" asked Brooklyn. "Really? You want to help?" "Of course, you're so excited about this, it's contagious. Besides, it might be fun." The involvement of Brooklyn and other friends in organizing the fair brought new energy to the project. They contributed creative ideas and were willing to work for free at the event. When William learned of Madison's initiative, he offered financial support to cover the initial costs of the fair. "Dad, I don't want you to pay for everything. The idea is to raise money for the center, not spend yours," said Madison. "Well then, how about I sponsor part of the costs as a donation from the company? That way you can use all the money raised for the center's programs." William's proposal was fair and would allow maximizing the resources allocated to the community center. Madison accepted the sponsorship, but insisted that the company's name appear discreetly, without ostentation. During the preparations for the fair, Madison worked side by side with the families in the community. She learned to make handmade decorations, helped prepare the traditional food, and even rehearsed a square dance with the children. "Principal Madison, are you going to dance in the square dance with us?" asked Ethan, excited by the idea. "I don't know how to square dance, Ethan. I'll teach you, it's easy, watch," he said, beginning to show her the basic steps. Ethan's spontaneity in teaching her something made Madison laugh and agree to participate in the square dance. During rehearsals, she had more fun than she had in years rediscovering joy. The summer charity fair at the community center was an absolute success. Hundreds of people from the community attended, creating a festive and welcoming atmosphere. Madison worked throughout the entire event, helping with everything from selling food to organizing the games. Ethan stood out as the fair's entertainer, leading songs and encouraging everyone's participation. His contagious joy made even the shyest people get involved in the activities. "Principal, did you see how many people came?" said Ethan, running up to Madison during a break. "Yes, I did. It's been wonderful. My mom said it's all thanks to you. She's very proud." Jennifer's recognition touched Madison deeply. Seeing the positive impact of her work on the lives of the community's families filled her with a satisfaction she had never experienced with her previous accomplishments. During the square dance, Madison danced alongside Ethan, Mrs. Evelyn, and several other people who had become important in her life. The moment was especially significant because it represented her complete integration with the community. "Now you are part of our family," said Mrs. Evelyn, hugging Madison after the square dance presentation. The fair raised a surprising amount of money, enough to fund the tutoring program for an entire year and still have money left over for improvements to the center's structure. "Madison, you can't imagine what this means for us," said Mrs. Eleanor, moved by the result. "I'm the one who should thank you for the opportunity to participate. This fair taught me more about community than any lesson ever could." After the success of the summer charity fair, Madison's reputation in the community changed completely. She was no longer seen as the rich girl doing volunteer work, but as a young woman genuinely committed to everyone's well-being. This change in perception was also reflected in her personal life. William noticed that his daughter was more confident, more empathetic, and had developed leadership skills he never imagined she possessed. "Catherine, our daughter has become a completely different person," William commented to his wife. "Different how?" "More mature, more aware of her role in the world, and most importantly, happier." Catherine agreed with the observation. Madison truly seemed happier and more fulfilled than she had ever been, even during the times when she had every possible privilege. During the school vacation period, Madison decided to intensify her work at the community center even further. Instead of traveling to exotic destinations as she used to, she chose to spend her time developing new educational programs. "Mrs. Eleanor, I would like to create a basic computer skills course for the teenagers in the community," Madison proposed. "That would be fantastic, but we don't have computers or the technical knowledge for that. My father has several old computers at the company that could be donated, and I can learn to teach basic computer classes." The computer course project required a lot of planning and dedication. Madison spent several weeks studying teaching methods and updating herself on technology to be able to transmit knowledge efficiently. William was impressed by the seriousness and commitment his daughter showed to the project. "Madison, are you sure you want to spend your entire vacation working at the community center?" "I'm sure, Dad. This work makes me feel useful in a way I've never felt before." "And your friends? Your social activities?" "The friends who really matter support what I'm doing. And as for social activities, I've discovered I prefer activities that have a greater purpose." Madison's answer demonstrated a maturity and clarity of values that surprised William. She had found her true passion and was willing to give up superficial pleasures to dedicate herself to it. The basic computer course was launched at the start of the vacation with 15 teenage students. Madison prepared a curriculum that ranged from basic computer use to notions of the internet and responsible social media. During the first classes, she noticed that some students had very little familiarity with technology, while others already had intermediate knowledge through access to cell phones. This diversity required constant adaptations to the teaching method. Teacher Madison, is it true you know famous people on Instagram? Asked one of the students, Chloe, who was 15. I know a few people with many followers. Why? Replied Madison, curious. Because my dream is to be an influencer. Can I learn that in your course? Chloe's question opened an interesting discussion about social media, digital influence, and online responsibility. Madison seized the opportunity to teach about the positive and negative aspects of the internet. Chloe, being an influencer can be a profession, but it's important to use influence responsibly. Remember the video that went viral a few months ago of a girl humiliating an elderly lady? Said Madison, indirectly referencing her own past. I remember. It was terrible. The girl was very cruel. Exactly. That's an example of how not to use digital influence. We can use our online presence to spread positivity and help other people. During the discussions about digital responsibility, Madison found herself indirectly confronting her own past. Talking about the responsible use of social media was particularly meaningful for someone who had used those platforms to humiliate another person. After a few weeks of the course, Madison decided to tell the students about her own experience with the irresponsible use of social media, without going into specific details. Everyone, you know I wasn't always the person I am today, she said during a class on digital ethics. What do you mean, teacher? Asked one of the students. I used social media irresponsibly in the past. I posted things that hurt other people and only later understood the negative impact of my actions. And what did you do to change? Asked Chloe. First, I acknowledged my mistakes. Then, I started working here at the center and learned about empathy and respect through interacting with people different from me. Madison's confession sparked a rich discussion about regret, personal change, and second chances. The students showed maturity in handling the topic, and several shared their own experiences with online mistakes. Teacher, is it hard to change when you've already done something wrong? Asked one of the younger students. It's challenging but not impossible. The important thing is to have the courage to acknowledge the mistakes and work to become a better person. During the vacation, Madison also took the opportunity to regularly visit Mrs. Martha Miller, who had become an important figure in her personal transformation journey. The visits were no longer obligatory or awkward, but rather genuine meetings between two people who had developed mutual affection. How are the classes at the community center going? Asked Mrs. Martha Miller during one of the visits. They are going very well. The children are fantastic, and I feel like I'm learning more than I'm teaching, replied Madison. That's so good to hear. I always knew you had a good heart. You just needed to find the right path. Mrs. Miller, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, dear. How were you able to forgive me so easily? I was very cruel to you. Mrs. Miller was thoughtful for a few moments before answering. You know, Madison, I've lived long enough to learn that holding on to resentment only hurts the one who holds it. Besides, I saw in you a lost girl, not a bad person. But I could have continued being cruel. You took a risk by forgiving me. That's true, but I believed you had the potential to change. And look how right I was, said Mrs. Miller with a proud smile. The conversation with Mrs. Miller made Madison reflect on the nature of forgiveness and personal transformation. She realized that Mrs. Miller had been instrumental not only in her change, but also in maintaining her faith in the possibility of redemption. When the holidays ended and the new school year began, Madison was unrecognizably different from the young woman who had publicly humiliated an elderly person less than a year before. Her priorities had completely changed, her relationships were deeper and more meaningful, and she had found a purpose that genuinely fulfilled her. At school, she became a natural leader in social projects and community initiatives. Teachers and classmates recognized her transformation and often sought her out for advice on volunteer work and social responsibility. Maddie, could you talk about your work at the community center for my sociology class? Asked Mr. David. Of course, it would be an honor to share that experience. During the presentation for the sociology class, Madison spoke passionately about her journey of personal transformation and the lessons she learned through volunteer work. The most important thing I learned is that real happiness comes from contributing to other people's happiness. It sounds cliché, but it's true, she told her classmates. After the presentation, several students approached her, interested in starting volunteer work. Madison guided them about different opportunities in the city and offered to accompany them in their first experiences. The positive influence that Madison came to exert in her school was a direct reflection of the internal changes she had experienced. She had become the kind of person who inspired others to be better, the exact opposite of who she was before. During her senior year of high school, Madison began to think seriously about her future plans. The experiences at the community center had sparked in her a genuine interest in areas such as social education, community psychology, and non-profit organization management. "Dad, I want to talk to you about my plans for college," Madison said one evening. "Of course, honey. Have you decided what you want to study?" "I'm thinking about social pedagogy or psychology, something that will allow me to continue working with under-resourced communities." William was surprised, but not discouraged by his daughter's choice. "Are you sure? Those are fields that don't offer the same financial returns as business or law." "Dad, in the last few months I've discovered that money isn't what makes me happy. I want to make a difference in people's lives, and these fields would give me the necessary tools." "And what if you change your mind later?" "If that happens, I'll change my major. But for now, this is my passion." Madison's decision to pursue a career focused on social impact rather than financial gain represented the culmination of her transformation. She had gone from a materialistic and superficial young woman to someone guided by values of service and purpose. Catherine initially expressed concern about her daughter's career choices, fearing she might regret them later. "William, do you think we should fully support this decision? She's still very young to know what she really wants," said Catherine. "Catherine, I'd rather have a daughter happy doing what she loves than a rich, unhappy daughter doing something that doesn't motivate her," replied William. "But what if she needs financial help in the future?" "Then we help her. But look how radiant she is talking about her plans. Don't you remember the last time we saw her this excited about anything?" Catherine reflected on her husband's words and agreed that Madison truly seemed more fulfilled and happier than she had ever been, even with fewer material privileges than before. During the final months of high school, Madison continued to intensify her work at the community center. She had become a key part of the organization, contributing not only with manual labor, but also with innovative ideas to improve the programs offered. Ethan, now 9 years old, remained one of her favorite students. The boy had made impressive progress in both Portuguese and English and showed academic potential that even surprised Madison. "Teacher Madison, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher just like you," Ethan said one afternoon after class. "Ethan, you can be anything you want. You're very smart and hardworking. But I want to help other kids like you help us." Ethan's comment deeply touched Madison. Seeing that her transformation had inspired a child to dream of a public service career filled her with pride and responsibility. "If you really want to be a teacher, I'll help you achieve that. You can count on me," promised Madison. "Even when you go to college. Even then. I promise I won't forget you or anyone here." The promise Madison made to Ethan was sincere and reflected her lasting commitment to the community. She had understood that her personal transformation implied responsibilities that would extend far beyond her phase of mandatory volunteer work. As the end of the school year approached, Madison began planning how she would maintain her involvement with the community center during college. She researched higher education institutions that offered community outreach programs and supported social projects. "Mrs. Eleanor, I would like to keep working here even after I start college," Madison said during a meeting. "That would be wonderful, but we know college demands a lot of time. I'll organize myself to continue teaching at least one class a week, and during breaks, I can intensify the work." "Madison, you know you don't have to commit to this. You've already done more than we ever expected." "I do need to, Mrs. Eleanor. This community changed my life, and I want to give back for the rest of my life." The long-term commitment Madison was undertaking demonstrated that her transformation had solidified. She was no longer doing volunteer work out of obligation or to repair past mistakes, but because she had discovered her true calling. During the high school graduation, Madison was chosen to give the class farewell speech. Her personal transformation and leadership in social projects made her a natural choice to represent her classmates. In her speech, she spoke about second chances, personal transformation, and the importance of using one's privileges to help others. Colleagues, we have had the privilege of studying at an excellent school with dedicated teachers and abundant resources. This education gives us responsibilities, not just rights, she said during the speech. Each of us has the potential to positively impact other people's lives. The question is not whether we have the capacity to do so, but whether we will have the courage to take on that responsibility. Madison's speech moved the audience and inspired several of her classmates to get involved with volunteer work during the period between the end of high school and the start of university. After graduation, Madison intensified her work at the community center even further, using the months off to develop new projects and consolidate existing programs. One of the most ambitious projects she developed was a mentorship program, where young people from the community were paired with volunteer college students to receive academic and professional guidance. The idea is to create a support network that helps these young people access opportunities that normally wouldn't be available to them, Madison explained to William during a conversation about the project. How do you plan to recruit the college mentors? I'll start by talking with classmates who are going to nearby universities. Many have already shown interest after my graduation speech. And if you don't get enough volunteers, then we start small and grow gradually. The important thing is to plant the seed. Madison's ability to think strategically about social projects demonstrated a maturity and vision that impressed William. She had developed leadership and management skills that would be valuable in any professional field. During the process of implementing the mentorship program, Madison worked side by side with Mrs. Eleanor, learning about social project management, fundraising, and volunteer coordination. Madison, you have a natural talent for this work, commented Mrs. Eleanor. Have you ever thought about studying non-profit organization administration? I have, but I think social education would be more suitable for me. I want to keep the focus on direct work with people. Why not both? You could study social education for your undergraduate degree and specialize in NGO management later. Mrs. Eleanor's suggestion planted a seed in Madison's mind. She began researching possibilities for combining training in social education with knowledge of organizational management. When the university enrollment period arrived, Madison had made her decision. She would study social pedagogy and would immediately start looking for internship opportunities at non-governmental organizations. Dad, I've decided on my major and my university, announced Madison during dinner. What will it be? Asked Catherine. Social pedagogy at the State University. They have an excellent community outreach program. And why not a private university? We could easily afford it, said William. Because the State University has more established social projects and professors with more practical experience in the field. Besides, I want to study alongside people from different social classes. Madison's choice of a public university reflected her understanding of the importance of social diversity in her education. She wanted to continue learning from people of different backgrounds, as she had done at the community center. In the months before starting university, Madison organized a large farewell party at the community center, not for herself, but to celebrate the first full year of operation of the educational program she had helped implement. This party is for you, who trusted me and taught me so much, she said during the event. Ethan, now more mature and articulate, gave a short speech on behalf of the children. Principal Madison, you changed our lives. Before you came, we only came here to eat. Now we come to learn, to dream, and to believe we can be anything we want to be. Ethan's words moved everyone present, especially Madison, who saw in that moment the true impact of her personal transformation on other people's lives. During the fair, Mrs. Martha Miller made a special appearance. William had discreetly arranged her transportation and stay at the event, knowing it would be meaningful for Madison to have the presence of the woman who had been the catalyst for her journey of change. Madison, I wanted to tell you how proud I am of the woman you've become, said Mrs. Miller, hugging the young woman affectionately. Mrs. Miller, none of this would have happened without you. You taught me about forgiveness and gave me the chance to become a better person. No, dear. You chose to change. I just showed you it was possible. The meeting between Madison and Mrs. Miller during the fair was especially symbolic. It represented the full circle of her journey, from humiliation to forgiveness, from arrogance to humility, from selfishness to service. When the time came for Madison to start university, she had established herself as a respected and beloved community leader. Her personal transformation had inspired positive changes in dozens of other people, creating a multiplier effect that extended far beyond her own life. "Sweetheart, I couldn't be prouder of who you've become," said William the day he took Madison to university. "Thank you, Dad, for having patience with me and for giving me the opportunity to find my way. You found the way yourself. I just created the conditions for it to happen." During her first months at university, Madison kept her promise to stay involved with the community center. She visited every week and kept in constant contact with the children through messages and calls. Ethan remained her most faithful correspondent, sharing details about his progress in school and his dreams for the future. "Principal, I got the highest score on my English test," Ethan shared during a call. "I'm so proud, Ethan. Keep it up, and soon you'll be at university too." "You really think I can get there?" "I'm sure of it." "You're smart, dedicated, and have all the support you need to succeed." The conversations with Ethan and other children from the community center kept Madison connected to her original motivation and constantly reminded her why she had chosen her field of study. At university, she quickly stood out both for her academic performance and her involvement in outreach projects. Professors noted her practical experience and her genuine passion for the field. "Madison, you have an unusual background for someone your age," commented Professor Deborah during a class on community psychology. "How so, Professor?" "Most students arrive here with a theoretical interest in the field. You already have consistent practical experience and a deep understanding of the real challenges. I was lucky to start early and to learn from amazing people in the community." Madison's prior experience in community work placed her in a unique position among her classmates. She often shared practical insights during classroom discussions and became a sought-after person for forming study groups and projects. During her second semester at university, she began working on a research project about the impact of educational programs in under-resourced communities, using the community center as a case study. "Professor Deborah, I would like to use my experience at the New Beginnings Center to develop research on the effectiveness of community educational programs," proposed Madison. "That's an excellent idea. You have privileged access to the data and the people involved." "Exactly. And I would like the results to be used to improve the programs, not just for academic purposes." The practical approach Madison brought to her university research reflected her mindset of always seeking concrete results that benefited the communities she worked with. During the development of the research, she carefully documented the academic progress of the children participating in the programs, collected testimonials from families, and analyzed data on school attendance and performance. The results were impressive. Children who regularly participated in the community center programs showed significant improvement in grades, a decrease in school dropout rates, and the development of important socio-emotional skills. "Ethan, can you tell me how you feel different since you started attending classes at the center?" asked Madison during an interview for her research. "I feel smarter, more confident. Before I was shy about speaking in school, now I raise my hand to answer questions," replied Ethan. "And what else has changed? I started dreaming about things I used to think were impossible, like being a teacher, going to college. You showed me that's possible." Ethan's testimony perfectly captured the transformative impact Madison had observed in many of the children. The work not only improved academic performance, but expanded horizons and nurtured dreams. When the research was completed, the results were so positive that the university decided to use it as a model to develop similar programs in other communities. "Madison, your research caught the attention of the university outreach department. They want to talk to you about expanding the model to other regions," informed Professor Deborah. "That would be amazing. But I would like the expansion to be done carefully, respecting the particularities of each community." That is exactly the approach they want to adopt. That's why they are interested in drawing on your experience. The opportunity to expand the work that had begun as a personal punishment into a model replicable in other communities represented the culmination of Madison's journey. She had gone from someone who caused social harm to someone who created solutions for social problems. During the year-end holidays, Madison returned to the community center full-time, taking the opportunity to implement improvements based on her university research and to train new volunteers who would join the programs. Ethan, now 10 years old, had become a kind of informal assistant, helping with younger children and demonstrating leadership skills that impressed the adults. "Ethan, you have a knack for being a mentor. Want to try helping with the younger group?" suggested Madison. "Can I really? I would love to." "Of course, you know the program well and have patience with children." Ethan's development as a junior leader at the community center was a special source of pride for Madison. Seeing that child she had met as shy and insecure, transforming into a confident and helpful young man, validated everything she had learned about the transformative power of education and care. During these holidays, Madison also organized a special meeting with all the families served by the center's programs. She wanted to hear directly from them about the impact of the work and collect suggestions for improvements. "Everyone, you know this center only exists because of your participation. We want to hear what you think of the programs and how we can improve," said Madison during the meeting. Jennifer, Ethan's mother, was one of the first to speak. "Madison, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for my son. He's unrecognizable at school, much more confident and interested in learning." "And it's not just Ethan," added Mrs. Evelyn. "My granddaughter has also changed a lot since she started coming here. She talks about going to college as if it was something normal, not an impossible dream." The family's testimonials confirmed the data Madison had collected in her research, but in a more emotional and impactful way. Seeing the genuine appreciation from people whose lives she had touched filled her with deep satisfaction. During the meeting, several families voluntarily offered additional help for the center's programs. Some parents offered to share their professional skills in workshops, others offered help with maintenance and organization. "Mrs. Eleanor, I think we've reached a point where the community has truly taken ownership of the center," commented Madison after the meeting. "It's true. The families no longer see themselves as beneficiaries, but as partners. That is the most important result of our work." "Exactly. The goal was always empowerment, not dependence." Madison's awareness of the importance of community empowerment demonstrated her growing sophistication as a social educator. She had learned that sustainability in social projects comes from the active involvement of the community itself. When she returned for her second year of college, Madison brought with her a wealth of experiences and insights that continued to impress professors and classmates. She had established herself as one of the most promising students in her program. During this period, she began receiving invitations to speak at conferences about community education and social transformation. Her personal story, combined with her practical experience and academic research, made her a captivating speaker. "Everyone, my journey began in a less than honorable way," she would say during one of her talks. "I was an arrogant young woman who humiliated less fortunate people, but I learned that personal transformation is possible when we have the courage to acknowledge our mistakes and work to make amends." Madison's talks had a particular impact on young audiences who identified with her honesty about past mistakes and were inspired by her journey of redemption. After one of her talks, a student approached her with a question that made Madison reflect deeply. "Madison, do you think you would have found your calling if you hadn't made that initial mistake?" asked the student. "That's a difficult question. Perhaps not. My mistake forced me to confront aspects of my personality that I was ignoring. Without it, I might have continued living a superficial life." "So are you grateful for the mistake?" "I am grateful for the opportunity for change that came after the mistake. The mistake itself caused unnecessary suffering to a good person. But yes, it was the catalyst for my transformation." This reflection on her journey helped Madison develop a mature perspective on personal growth and the importance of accepting responsibility for past actions without letting them define her permanently. During her third year of college, Madison decided to further formalize her commitment to community work. She began the process of founding her own non-governmental organization, focused on community education and youth empowerment. "Dad, I want to found an NGO to expand the work I've been doing," she announced during a family conversation. "Are you sure you're ready for that responsibility?" asked William. "I am. I already manage practically all the educational programs at the New Beginnings Center. I have experience in fundraising, and I have a deep understanding of the challenges in the field." "And what about the bureaucratic and legal aspects? I'll get help from lawyers and accountants, but I already have a handle on the operational part." William's support was crucial for Madison to realize her dream of founding her own organization. He offered help with administrative aspects and connected his daughter with experienced professionals in the field. The NGO founded by Madison, named the Transformation Institute, had the mission of developing community educational programs that promoted social transformation through individual empowerment. Ethan, now 12 years old and developing his leadership skills even further, was invited to join the organization's youth council, representing the perspective of the children served by the programs. "Principal Madison, can I really be part of the council?" asked Ethan, visibly moved by the invitation. "Of course you can. Your opinion is essential to ensure our programs truly meet the children's needs." "And what exactly will I do?" "You'll participate in meetings, give suggestions about the programs, and help evaluate if we're doing a good job." The inclusion of Ethan on the NGO's council represented Madison's commitment to genuine community participation in all aspects of her work. During her last year of university, Madison divided her time between studies managing the NGO and preparing her thesis on the impact of community educational programs on the socio-emotional development of children and adolescents. Her thesis was based on 5 years of data collected at the New Beginnings Center and included quantitative analyses of academic performance combined with qualitative studies on behavioral and aspirational changes. "Professor Deborah, I would like my thesis to be used as a practical manual for other organizations," said Madison during an advisory session. "That's an excellent idea. You could structure the work to include replicable methodologies." "Exactly. I want it to be a real contribution to the field, not just an academic exercise." The practical approach Madison brought to her university thesis reflected her mindset of always seeking concrete and applicable results in her academic research. When the time came for the thesis defense, the examination panel included not only university professors, but also community representatives and beneficiaries of the programs Madison had developed. Ethan, now 13 years old and articulate like few teenagers his age, was invited to give a testimony about the impact of the programs on his life. "I was a shy child who thought I would never achieve anything in life. Today I know I can be anything I want, and that's because of Principal Madison's programs," said Ethan during the defense. The testimony moved everyone present and served as living evidence of the effectiveness of the methods Madison had researched and developed. Mrs. Martha Miller, now 75 years old but still lucid and active, was also invited to the defense. Her presence symbolized the complete journey of Madison's transformation. "When I met this girl, she was full of anger and arrogance. Today, she is a dedicated educator who transforms lives. If that isn't proof that people can change, I don't know what is," said Mrs. Martha during her participation. Madison's thesis defense was approved with honors, and her research was recommended for publication in specialized journals in the field of social education. During the graduation ceremony, Madison was chosen to receive the award for Best Student in the course, a recognition that included not only academic performance, but also contribution to the community. In her award acceptance speech, she dedicated the honor to all the people who had been part of her transformation journey. "This award is not mine. It's for every child who trusted me, for every family who opened their doors to me, and especially for Mrs. Martha Miller, who taught me that forgiveness is the first step toward any real transformation," she said during the speech. After graduation, Madison dedicated herself fully to the Transformation Institute, which had grown significantly and now served 3 different communities in the city. Ethan continued to be one of her closest collaborators, and at 14, he already showed exceptional skills as a young educator and community leader. "Ethan, have you thought about what career you want to follow when you grow up?" asked Madison during one of their regular conversations. "I want to be a social educator just like you, but I also want to study law so I can fight for the rights of poor people." "What an interesting combination. Social education and law can be very complementary." "That's what I think. You taught me to dream big, so I dream of being a lawyer and an educator at the same time." Ethan's ambition reflected the lasting impact that Madison's work had had on his life. The boy she had met as shy and with low self-esteem had transformed into a confident young man with clear and ambitious goals. 5 years after her college graduation, Madison had established herself as one of the leading references in community education in the region. The Transformation Institute served over 500 children and adolescents in 8 different communities. Ethan, now 19, had officially become an employee of the organization while studying law at a public university, benefiting from a scholarship program that Madison had helped create. "Professor, do you remember when you asked me if I wanted to be a monitor for the little kids class?" said Ethan during a team meeting. "I remember perfectly. You were 10 and you were so excited. That was the day I discovered I wanted to work in education. You planted that seed in me. Ethan, you planted many seeds in me too. You taught me about resilience, gratitude, and the joy of learning." The relationship between Madison and Ethan had evolved from teacher-student to work partners, always maintaining the affection and mutual respect that had characterized their friendship from the beginning. During a meeting of the Transformation Institute's board, Ethan presented an innovative proposal to create a program where young people who had benefited from the educational programs would become mentors for younger children. "The idea is to create a chain of transformation. Each person who was positively impacted goes on to impact others," explained Ethan. "It's a brilliant proposal," exclaimed Madison. "You young people understand better than us adults how to connect with children." "Exactly. And it would also create more job opportunities for young people from the community itself." Ethan's proposal was approved unanimously and became one of the Institute's most successful programs, generating local jobs and further strengthening community bonds. Mrs. Martha Miller, who at 80 still visited the Institute regularly, watched with pride the evolution of Madison and the growing impact of her work. "Madison, do you remember when we met?" asked Mrs. Miller during one of her visits. "How could I forget? You were carrying firewood and I was terrible to you. That cruel girl no longer exists. In her place, a woman has emerged who dedicates her life to spreading kindness in the world. You gave me the chance to become a better person. I will never forget that. And I will never forget seeing you discover who you really were inside. It was one of the most beautiful gifts life gave me." End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Madison truly managed to transform herself? Do we all have the capacity for change as profound as hers? Share your honest thoughts in the comments about this journey of redemption. Thank you for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.